What do people seem to love as much as singing competitions? How about jukebox musicals? Or maybe movies starring lovable anthropomorphic characters? Well, Illumination has managed to combine all three into one film franchise that can be summed up with one word: Sing. With its sequel just hitting theaters, we decided to break down the characters of both Sing and Sing 2 to see who's pure and good and who's about as pleasant as a sour note. I'm Kyle with WickedBinge, and this is Sing and Sing 2 characters good to evil. As always, we'll be starting with our most pure and noble characters before working our way down. These characters are the good. Easily earning our gold medal of good is Mina. While her incredible singing talents may have remained a mystery to most due to her stage fright, her big heart was clear from the very beginning. She's an incredibly kind and gentle girl, and is always seen being friendly and kind towards others. She's often baking sweets to try to cheer others up, like she tries to do with Buster. Speaking of Buster, although she had meant to try and get herself another audition, Mina is still willing to step up and be a stagehand when Buster asks her to. Towards the climax of the first movie, it's Mina's talent as a singer, as well as her willingness to try, and the encouragement and inspiration she gives Buster, that leads to the theater gang eventually succeeding in their show. Although she may not be heroic in the traditional sense, Mina is definitely the most pure out of the entire Sing cast. For this, we felt that we had to give her our top spot. We're giving the silver medal of good to Rosita. Although she originally dreamed of being a singer, she gave up this dream in order to be a devoted housewife and mother of 25 piglets. As such, we see that Rosita is an incredibly hard worker, and although she does abandon her household duties to be in the show, she makes sure to first create a machine to take care of her family. Sure, the machine does malfunction, but that wasn't due to anything on Rosita's part. Rosita also seems to act like the team mom of the group, like when she tries to comfort Ash after her breakup. Her most heroic act was saving Buster's life in the climax of the second movie, pushing herself to get over her fear of heights so that Buster didn't get hurt. So yeah, Rosita can be pretty brave too. For all the hard work that she does, she more than earns a high ranking on our list. Getting our bronze medal of good is another pig character, Gunter. Not only is Gunter one of the most fun characters in the film, but he's also one of the most positive.
You joking me? We're going to be spicy, no?
Much like Mina, Gunter is a pure-hearted character who doesn't seem to have a mean bone in his body. Throughout the first movie, Gunter is encouraging towards Rosita and tries to help her become more comfortable with dancing. He tries to help her loosen up and shed her inhibitions so that she can let out her own brand of piggy power, and is just a great friend to her. Heck, Gunter even volunteers to babysit all 25 of Rosita's kids in one of the DVD shorts. Certainly not an easy task, yet he does it with a smile on his face. Simply put, Gunter is just an all-around nice guy, and although he can be somewhat of an airhead, we can't take off too many points for that. Up next is the spiky punk rock singer, Ash. It would have been too easy to make Ash standoffish, or someone who thought that she was too cool to hang out with or help her fellow competitors. Thankfully, Ash has a pretty good heart underneath all those quills. Although some describe her as a moody teenager, she's just as much of a team player as the rest of the gang. She encourages Buster to put on the show even when it seems like all is lost. And even after she goes solo, Ash never forgets about her friends. She truly gets to shine in the second movie through her scenes with Calloway. Just how sympathetic and encouraging she can be. While many teen characters might fall into the trope of being mean and sarcastic, Ash thankfully doesn't stumble into any of those pitfalls. Moving on, we have Eddie Noodleman. Eddie is Buster's best friend, and while he doesn't always believe in Buster's plans, he always seems to be by his side. Though he can be extremely lazy at times, thanks to his pampered lifestyle, Eddie doesn't really falter when it comes to being Buster's friend. He gives Buster a place to stay, and then when Buster is forced to start washing cars to make a living, Eddie volunteers to help dry them, which was really sweet.
Come on. You wash, I'll dry.
Later on, when Mina decides that she wants to be in the show, it's Eddie that takes over as the stagehand and helps put on the gang show. He may not be a performer, but he's still a great guy. Next up is Buster's elderly assistant, Miss Crawley. Falling into the kooky old lady trope, Miss Crawley can be more than a little bit ditzy, as well as pretty clumsy. But while it is her mistake that causes the flyer to read $100,000 instead of only $1,000, this really was just an accident, and one that she's extremely apologetic about. Though she may not share Buster's passions, Crawley does all she can to help him. This shows how intensely loyal she is to Buster, happily sticking by him even after the destruction of the Moon Theater. Crawley also takes the time to teach Johnny how to play the piano, even when it takes hours of her own free time. While she may sometimes be seen as a liability due to all of her mistakes, in terms of personality and morality, she really is one of the best employees a person like Buster could ask for. We've now come to another one of the newer characters, Nushi. She is a streetwise lynx as well as an incredible dancer. As such, it's no surprise when Johnny comes to her for help. Though she sees him as a weirdo at first, it really doesn't take her long to agree to be Johnny's coach, and she's patient and kind while teaching him. During Johnny's big performance, she's the one who encourages him to keep going when it looks like he's going to fail. All in all, she is an incredibly supportive and great friend. And speaking of Johnny, we're actually ranking him next. Despite being part of a gang family, Johnny is a good kid at heart. He has no interest in committing crimes, and despite being a literal gorilla, he's actually pretty gentle and kind, if a bit awkward. However, Johnny can be pretty reckless at times, even causing a huge car pileup at one point. He also nearly stole the prize money in the first movie, only stopping when he learned that Buster thought he had potential. Although he had planned to use the stolen money to get his dad out of jail, it still wasn't a great moment for him.
I just don't want to be in your gang. I want to be a singer.
But even with these noticeable flaws, Johnny's goodness still manages to shine through. Next up is another new character, rockstar legend Clay Calloway. Formerly a rockstar legend, Clay isolated himself from the rest of the world after the death of his beloved wife. Because of this, Clay can sometimes come off as a bit gruff, a bit antisocial, and somewhat hostile. However, he never really gets to the point of being a jerk about it, even if he does occasionally snap at others. He ends up taking Ash's words to heart and helps the gang with their show, which shows that he can be selfless. He even encourages Buster not to run away. Not bad for an old rock star. Wrapping up the good tier, we finally come to the koala who started it all, Buster Moon. For all his optimism and encouragement, Buster can also be somewhat sneaky, inconsiderate, and not exactly honest. He has a bad habit of promising more than he can deliver, a habit that he carries over into the sequel when he promises to have Calloway in his show before he's even spoken to him. Buster can also be a bit pushy with his performers, asking them to learn a new skill or pushing them towards a certain music genre.
Bingo! Pop star princess!
We should also note that he didn't have any qualms with stealing power and electricity for his theater in the first movie. And while the flyer mistake wasn't on him, he was the one who continued to lie about it. So yeah, Buster really isn't the most honest guy. However, he is kind and encouraging towards his performers and employees, and in general is more good-hearted than bad. He could certainly stand to be a bit more moral, but even as he stands, Buster still manages to make it into our good section. With those characters out of the way, it's time to focus on our more neutral characters, as we move into our gray area. We're starting off this tier with Nana Noodleman. She's Eddie's grandmother as well as an incredibly talented singer who inspired Buster during her glory days. She's a bit snobbish and standoffish, and it takes a lot for her to be impressed. Nana does, however, still have a heart underneath all that wool. Although it took a while for Buster to earn her respect, she ultimately gave it to him once he and his singers were able to impress her. Afterwards, Nana buys the theater, allowing Buster to continue his dream. We also see Nana continuing to support Buster in the sequel, encouraging him after he and his cast are rejected by a talent agent. Although she grew to be a lot kinder than she first appeared, we still felt that her frequent insults of her nephew and that attitude she held for most of the first film were enough to land her a spot in the gray tier. Next up, we have Crystal Entertainment talent scout Suki. She starts off as a typical talent agent, being fairly arrogant and even leaving Buster's show before the second act. telling them that they aren't good enough. However, once the crew begins working with Crystal Entertainment, Suki begins to soften up quite a bit. She also ends up being the one to free Buster from the closet after Jimmy locks him in, telling him to get out of Red Shore City while he can. In the end, we see Suki supporting Buster and his performers, actually helping them with their efforts when it comes to getting more performances at major theaters. While she may have started off as dismissive, it was nice to see Suki turn around and become more of an ally. Managing to rank a bit higher than we would have thought, next is Portia Crystal. As the last name implies, she's the daughter of Jimmy Crystal, who we'll get to in a bit. She starts off as a bit of an overeager starlet, and can be somewhat of a drama queen. It's also Portia's breakdown over believing that she's been fired that puts Buster's life at risk. However, we can't fully blame Portia for this, as it was a mistake on Portia's fault and she never told her father to get revenge on Buster for her. Thankfully, she also forgives easily, and is more than happy to join the show in the film's climax. She turns out to be not quite as much of a spoiled princess as we thought. Surprisingly, this tier is where we find Johnny's father, Big Daddy. He's a guerrilla gang leader, and while he obviously qualifies as a criminal, we feel he doesn't quite do enough to be considered evil, as Big Daddy and his gang mostly stick to bank robberies. Still, he can be pretty stern and even harsh towards Johnny, even though he still cares about him and doesn't necessarily want to be mean. After all, he managed to brush off Johnny accidentally running him over, caring more about Johnny managing to get his speed up during their getaway driver practices. He did briefly disown Johnny, but after realizing just how talented his son was, Big Daddy apologized and decided to support Johnny's dreams of being a singer. He doesn't play a huge role in the sequel, but we do see Big Daddy and his gang at the final performance, where they manage to stop Jimmy and his security team from getting in and stopping the show. As such, we know that Big Daddy kept his promise, and honestly, it's just nice to see that he's continuing to support his son. Managing to stay out of the bad tier by the skin of his mouth teeth, we have Mike. Despite his tiny size, he manages to have a big personality, wooing people over with his frank, Sinatra-esque voice, while having a pretty arrogant attitude. Because of this, Mike usually tends to come off as pretty rude, often insulting his fellow competitors.
Off the stage, Helga. Go on, you're useless. Thanks.
He also isn't the most moral guy around, given that he frequently cheats at cards and then just takes the money when he gets caught. However, we can't really call him a villain or evil, even if he is a jerk.
Just came back to show you bozos how it's really done.
While he has no issues with casually throwing insults around, Mike never tries to outright hurt people or sabotage his competition. He also shows respect towards Mina when he's wowed by her singing, and seems to genuinely care about his girlfriend despite originally only falling for her looks. It really is a shame that we never got to see Mike grow beyond his arrogant persona in the sequel. And with that said, time for a villainous musical number. These final few characters are the bad and the evil. We decided to give our bronze medal of evil to the Russian bear mob. The first Sing film only had two real villains: the bank that was trying to take the theater away, and the trio of bear mobsters. Considering that the bank representative was just doing her job and had been fairly patient on her part, we felt that the bears were the bigger antagonists.
Where is my money?
As they threatened to eat Mike before trying to steal the competition's prize money for themselves. Through this, they end up being partially responsible for the destruction of the theater. Later, after Mike seems to escape with his girlfriend, one bear manages to catch up to them. What makes this particularly noteworthy is that we don't see Mike again at the end of the film with the rest of the cast, nor does he appear in the sequel. We can't say for certain that the bears managed to actually eat Mike, getting their revenge once and for all, but the implication is still enough to get them on the list. Earning our silver medal of evil is the harsh Klaus Klickenklopper. He's the type of teacher that absolutely nobody wanted. When it comes to dance, he demands perfection and has very little patience for failure. Despite Johnny obviously trying his best, he continues to push him and put him down for his mistakes. Simply put, this guy's a pretty terrible teacher.
Tippy toes! I don't see your tippy toes!
What really elevates him to a villain, however, are his actions during the second film's climax. During Johnny's dance battle number, he takes the place of Johnny's original performance partner and tries to undermine the gorilla's performance. If it weren't for Nushi's encouragement, Klaus would have definitely ruined Johnny's performance and possibly even his career. What keeps him from falling any lower is that after Johnny proves him wrong, he does finally give Johnny his respect. But wrapping things up, our gold medal of evil has to go to Jimmy Crystal. Being the big bad of the sequel, he's the owner of Crystal Entertainment. Caring only about his reputation, Jimmy can be extremely intimidating, harsh, and cruel, even to his daughter.
I won't let you down, sir.
Better not, or I'll throw you off the roof.
This escalates to a whole new level when Jimmy follows through on his promise to throw Buster off a roof. Later on, when Portia is brought back into the show, Jimmy tries to force her to quit, caring more about his image than her happiness. Jimmy then tries one final time to kill Buster before getting arrested at the end of the movie. Simply put, Jimmy is as cutthroat as they come with pretty much no positive attributes. He doesn't even have a good excuse to go after Buster, unlike what the Bears had with Mike. All of these qualities made him the perfect recipient for the title of Most Evil Sing Character. But let us know in the comments section below if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.